If you're into true scary stories and true crime, make sure to subscribe to the channel for new videos every week. My company used to have an office 2 states over from where I worked. Most of the time I flew there, but sometimes we would have equipment or vehicles that needed to be delivered. In those cases, I volunteered to make the trip and would stay at another office for a week at a time. Sometimes I would stop at a rest stop to break up the drive, sleeping in the back of the vehicle for a bit. On this one particular day, I was driving a big box truck, such as one you would rent at a U-Haul. The back of the truck was filled with equipment and stuff from that office that we needed, so I offered to make the trip. Unfortunately, the morning I was scheduled to take off, there was a delay. A big copy machine we needed didn't arrive till almost 3 p.m. But after loading it into the truck and getting ready to take off, I knew I was going to hit rush hour traffic. So I opted to delay my leave for 2 hours, so it would be after 5 p.m. when I would take off. Even though there was still a decent amount of traffic, it would only be local in the vicinity. And once I got out to the freeway, it was pretty much a straight shot till I reached the state line. Having to pull over a couple times for fuel and restroom breaks, I arrived into a rural area north of my state after midnight. I pulled over for more gas and coffee. The next stretch was going to be very dark and desolate, so I was preparing myself. I knew there was a last rest stop near the state border, so I was going to pull over to use the restroom, stretch my legs, and maybe rest a few minutes before moving on. As I pulled up to the rest stop, I noticed it was empty, but somewhat well lit. I was in pretty good shape, so I wasn't worried too much about my safety, as I used to box. I decided to use the restroom and wash up for a bit, but when I began walking back, there was now a pickup next to my truck that I knew for a fact wasn't there before, and I noticed a man standing outside of it as I cautiously approached. He started to make small talk, then asked me if I was having any mechanical problems with my truck. I thought that was an odd thing to ask. I decided to just get back in my truck and take off. After this point, there's a long stretch that is mostly a forest-like area. Kinda creepy driving through at 3 a.m. I came up to a long bridge up ahead. Having driven this route before, I know that under it is a gorge in water. All of a sudden, all the lights in my truck turned off. I tapped on the brakes and looked behind me. Even the brake lights seemed to be out. Thankfully, it was a moonlit night, enough for me to gauge what was ahead of me. I was sort of more angry than panicked, so I slammed my fist on the dashboard and yelled, "Damn truck!" It was a Fonz move because suddenly everything turned back on again. I continued driving looking for somewhere to stop, such as a gas station, motel, or even shopping center, but nothing was in sight. I remembered a gas station though that I had stopped at another time, which was in a city about 10 more miles up the road. I eventually made it to the gas station, but I noticed that shortly after I pulled in, that same pickup truck with that guy from earlier pulled in as well. Now he wasn't pulling up to the pumps, so I got this chill. Did this man do something to my truck? I started to put some fuel in the truck, thinking about my next move. Just then, as I was about to get back in the vehicle, a cop car pulls into the station. I waved him down and he got out. I made some small talk and pointed back in the direction of the street where that pickup truck had been. But after I did that, the pickup drove off. I got back in my vehicle and decided that if the guy had done something to disable my truck, I better pull off for the night. I kept looking behind me to see if he was following me, but eventually I made it to another town a bit larger and pulled over. After finding a motel that was next to another gas station, I checked in. I locked up my truck, grabbed my bag, and kept looking around me, expecting the man to pop out. After getting into my room, I tried to sleep, but instead I just kept looking out my window. I think I only slept a few minutes at a time. The next morning, I checked out, ate breakfast, and headed back on the road. I eventually made it back to my office and asked them to have the truck looked at by a mechanic, and I told them the issue. They reported back to me after I was back home that the mechanic had found nothing wrong and that they have never experienced the same issue. I was in the US Air Force, stationed in Omaha in the late 80s. At the time, I always hung out with my roommate and another friend. My roommate and I actually shared the same name, Tracy, and then Stacy is the name of the girl that we hung out with. When we were together, everyone always thought we were lying about our names, and we would just laugh, just being the dumb teenagers we were. One weekend, we decided to take a road trip to Kansas City, Missouri. We were speeding down the highway, laughing, and just singing at the top of our lungs. Stacy was driving and had a bit of a lead foot, so before long, a state trooper pulled up behind us and turned on his lights. Stacy immediately pulled over. By the time the officer made it to her window, she had already had her license and registration in hand and the window down. The officer looked at her, me, and then Tracy. He then said, "I want you to follow me. Don't try to run off, or you will all be going to jail." He then went and got back into his car. Needless to say, the three of us were puzzled, and talking amongst ourselves, wondering why he didn't take Stacy's identification and just write her a ticket. The officer then pulled out slowly and we followed him down the road. He drove a few miles and then exited the highway. He then drove a little ways further and turned onto a dirt road that was surrounded by stalks of corn. We all stopped talking as we became alarmed. However, being young and scared of getting into trouble, we continued to follow him. The officer drove for some time down this dirt road and then pulled into this area that had a big beat-up old barn. As he stepped out, we pulled up behind him. That's when a group of men with shotguns exited the barn. It wasn't until that point that we realized we were in mortal danger, and panic set in. The officer walked back to our car, then told Stacy to get out and follow him to his car. As she got out, she looked at me and Tracy, and there was sheer terror on her face. She followed him to his car, and he motioned for her to get into the passenger side. She did. Tracy and I were crying, and as the armed men stood on the side of our car looking at us, we began quietly praying for God to protect us. We prayed that Stacy wasn't being hurt, and somehow they would let us leave. After some minutes, Stacy bolted out of the officer's car and ran back to our car, jumping into the driver's seat. She was crying hysterically. So of course Tracy and I began to cry harder. The officer got out of his car and walked back to our car, this time to Tracy's window as she was in the front passenger seat. He asked, "Is it true y'all are in the Air Force?" To which Tracy replied, "Yes, sir." The officer calmly said, "Get out of here and go back to where y'all came from. I better not see y'all again." As soon as he finished, Stacy turned on the car, whipped it around, and sped back down the dirt road. She somehow navigated back to the highway. As she drove back down towards the base, the silence was only broken by an occasional sob from one of us. Stacy drove for a while, and as soon as we crossed back over into the Nebraska state line, she pulled over to the side of the highway and began to sob. Tracy and I hugged her and asked if she was hurt in any way. She shook her head no. She wasn't hurt. After she calmed down enough, she told us what happened in the police car. After she got into the car, she offered the officer her identification and told him that she was sorry for speeding. He took her information and then asked, "What are you doing with those two?" Then proceeded with racist terms. Stacy was white and Tracy and I are not. She explained that we were on a road trip. He then told her that if she would do certain favors for him, he might let us go with a warning. At that, Stacy had a complete meltdown. I guess while he was waiting for her to calm down, he finally looked at her identification and saw that she had also given him her military ID. He asked if we were all in the military, and in between sobs, she said we were. He asked where we were stationed, and she told him. He then told her to go back to her car. As we sat there after Stacy told us what occurred, we all realized that the only thing that saved us was that we were in the military and stationed at a nearby base. We hugged each other and cried until we had no tears left. We didn't report what had happened. Again, we were teenagers and didn't think we'd be believed over a law enforcement officer. We never talked about it again after that day. That incident has haunted me for years, all of the what ifs. But as I've gotten older, what haunts me more is the thought that others may not have been as lucky as we were. When I was younger, each summer and every New Year, my family would pack up the car and go on a road trip to visit our family in Mexico. We never had any problems until one particular trip when I was 8. We left our home in North Texas around 6 p.m. in order to reach our destination by 2 a.m. the next morning. When we crossed into Mexico, that's when things got weird. We had been in Mexico for about an hour and still had a few more hours to go. I remember sleeping but still being semi-conscious of what was going on around me. So when my mother suddenly spoke my dad's name, I heard her. "Miguel, that car behind us. It's been behind us since we left Laredo." My dad peeked at the car, shrugging off my mom's worry. "A lot of cars use this road. He's probably going to Reynosa or another city." And he left it at that. When you're on the only stretch of freeway in the middle of the desert, you don't tend to freak out about having the same car behind you for miles. Despite his sureness, my mom kept an eye on the car behind us. By this time, my siblings and I were hyper aware of the car, and entertained ourselves with watching it through the gaps in the luggage that blocked the rear window. "He's getting closer," my mother noted, and we turned to watch as the car did inch closer and closer to ours. "He's too close, Miguel." And she was right. By this time, the car was practically pressed against the rear of our car, and on the lonely stretch of highway in the middle of nowhere, with another few hours till daylight, it was downright scary. We honestly couldn't do much. My dad didn't slow down, didn't stop, or speed away either. He just drove, and the car followed. The next 30 minutes were the most tense we had experienced. The car would ease off sometimes, only to press its blinding lights against our rear once more, like he knew it was freaking us out and enjoying it. It was during one of those periods when the car had pulled away that my mom spotted a police car up ahead, parked on the side of the road. "Pull over, right in front of the police. Pull over right now, Miguel." And he did. The car behind us kept driving. I wonder how confused the policeman must have been as he watched my dad park our car right in front of him. The policeman came over and asked what was wrong. My mother urgently told him everything. The policeman took her claims seriously and told us about people who were victimized, having their cars stolen on these highways. And then he offered to drive behind us for a while to make sure we were safe. We drove off with the police cruiser behind us, relieved. Until about 10 minutes later, when we saw something that confirmed the policeman and my mother's worst fears. The car that was following us from earlier was pulled over on the side of the road, waiting for us.